Welcome, everybody, to this new episode of the Women in Technology Spotlight. I'm so happy to have you here again. Today, I have with me Megan Lieu. She is a data scientist at Narrator. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. I know that I follow behind other awesome women that you've had on your show previously, so I'm really honored.
Thank you so much, Megan. Let's just kick off with a question about, so I introduced as a data scientist, and obviously I'm quite interested in what you do on a daily basis. What is a data science and what is your job?
Yeah, a data scientist at the most basic level really turns raw data into actionable insights by being able to predict future decisions that the company should make. And at the end of the day, everything that I do is in support of being able to help management have data-driven decisions. And it's been a really fun learning journey towards becoming a data scientist. And now that I am one, it is a super exciting role to be in, and I really love what I do at Narrator.
Yeah, that's actually my next question. How do you become a data scientist? Because there's not a study that says, okay, this is a study to become a data scientist. What did you do?
Yeah, certainly you can study to become a data scientist in school. I know that these days there are a lot of data science undergrad and master's degrees that a lot of employers do recruit from when they are looking for their entry-level data scientists. But for me, that is unfortunately not how I entered the field. Looking back, I always wish that I had I had studied some kind of field that was closer to data science, but I actually came from a finance background and did very little related to data analytics and data science in school, minus a couple of courses. And it was really those courses, maybe a handful, like 3 or 4 courses that I took while in business school as sort of side classes just to fill my time. Those classes that really shaped the what I wanted out of my career, but I didn't realize it until a couple of years into post-graduation, because immediately after I graduated from university, I went into the finance field because I had studied finance, I had prior internships in finance, and I truly thought that that was going to be my career path for life. I ended up at a Big 4 consulting firm as a financial analyst, and coming out of business school, that really was what I had defined as success for myself, ending up at a big company where I get to do finance, the field that I studied for. What more could I want, right? And then 2 years into that career, when I decided that I was really burnt out, and truly as deep as I had dug into I dug deep and I still could not find any more passion to give to the field. And that was when I had to ask myself, what would be my next move? What would be my pivot? And I thought back to those classes that I had taken in college about business analytics and machine learning and statistics, econometrics, things like that. And in school, didn't really pay attention to those classes because I had thought that at that time, I already had my full-time offer lined up to work in finance. So took those classes as just, to fill up my time, like I said. But now at this point where I'm at, not right now, but at the point where I was burnt out, I decided that I would give this data thing a try, because it was probably like one of the very few other fields that I had any exposure to. So I was like, I have nothing to lose. except for like the past 2 years of my life and several $1,000s in tuition, which I had already sunk in, and decided to go for data analytics. And after about a 4-month job search, I eventually made that transition, became an analytics consultant. And as an analytics consultant, I learned all of the data tools that I pretty much know today and that I need for my job every day, such as SQL, that's a big one, Python, R, statistics, data visualization, and building models and things like that. And those were the skills that I really had to hone in to make another pivot to become a data scientist 4 months ago. And 4 months ago was when I ended up at Narrator, and it's been an awesome journey so far. So to sum it all up, it definitely was not a straightforward path to become a data scientist for me. I was not somebody who went to school for the field and immediately joined as a data scientist. I had to jump through a couple hoops and go sideways and every which direction before coming here. And I do think that it is a pretty common path to take, where you first get into a data analytics role before becoming a data scientist. And so that is a path that I've seen other people take as well. And yeah, it can be a long, winding journey, but it is very worth it, at least in my case.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you are one of the many career switchers I talk to. So there's so many women who don't start out in tech or in IT, and then all of a sudden, they change and they find a passion there. But what I also found interesting is that, I mean, you had this beaten path that you were following. You had this career in front of you, and you really you finished your studies, and then you went into, as you said, you were in one of the top 4 consulting firms, and so basically everything that everyone would assume is something that you'd want, right?
Right.
And what I find interesting is that when we set out on our path to a career, we often don't realize what it really means to be inside that career later. So I was wondering, I mean, it's a bit of a pivot from what you're doing now, but I would be interested in what set you on that path to being a financial analyst or business analyst. Was that something you had role models for? Is your family in that business, or what was the reason you chose that field, actually?
Yeah, I had chosen finance as what I thought I would end up doing after college, because in the business school that I was at, it was mostly like finance and consulting roles that were held in esteem. And it was also, and that was a product of the kinds of companies that our business school often attracted. And in turn, that influenced what students believed would be considered successful. And so, yeah, coming out of my business school, it was like, yeah, you have to do finance. Like everybody does finance because that's where all the money is. And yeah, when I was young, I think I was very like influenced by what other people were doing or what other people considered was their definition of success. And so, yeah, I was very impressionable is the word I'm trying to say. And yeah, I just went along with the flow because all of my friends were going into finance. Investment banking was really the it thing to do. And I followed along with that.
Yeah, and I do agree. If you look at maybe movies and things, and that's also like this epitome of success that you will see, this investment bankers with their sharp suits and the money they're making, and all that.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that if you are within that community, that this is a path would be pushed on maybe. And I think that also brings me to the importance of role models and peers, because, the reason I'm doing this podcast is to show other women, how you can be successful in a tech career as a woman.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So coming back on that switch, what changed when you moved from finance to tech for you?
Yeah, quite honestly, it wasn't rewarding for me anymore. And I felt like that the concepts that I had learned in school about finance, about corporate finance, valuation, and related courses to that, like I was also studying it to take my chartered financial analyst exam when I was working in finance as well. And then I was also working with those concepts every day on the job, but it still like never clicked with me. I remember feeling like the valuation and like stock market and like just like all of these very complex finance topics that I had learned in school, I was seeing them again and again when I was on the job, but like I never bothered to really understand the fundamentals of the concepts. Like I was either memorizing it or I always depended on my seniors and my managers to explain to me like what was going on in our financial models. I never understood it, and I had to dig deep and ask myself, why is it that you don't care to learn these things? And at the end of the day, it was because it was just not my passion, and I saw it as just a means to an end, which was like to get the paycheck. And I don't think that was very healthy, and that can only take you so far. And so when I was burnt out with the workload, combining that with the passionless existence that I had, that really came to a head when it manifested itself in performance issues that my manager had brought up to me, and that was the final straw that indicated to me this was not the place for me. If I had to live like this for the next 40 years of my life before I retire, like that's not the kind of existence that I wanted. And so I really had to go out there in search of something new. And I happened upon this field in tech called data analytics, right? And that too could have been something like that was a shot in the dark. It was just another field that I had at least some exposure to, but I was like, I'm going to give this a try. And it worked out because just being able to think in like a data analyst or a data scientist's mindset in approaching data problems is something that naturally like clicked with my brain in a way that building financial models never did. And I just find this work just a lot more fulfilling because I find myself really enjoying solving problems. And that was never something that I could say about my time in finance. And I do think that I got lucky in finding this field that clicked so easily with me on my first try. But, for a lot of other people, it might take multiple pivots to find something where they feel fulfilled every day at work. And so I acknowledge that there was some luck in me happening upon the field that like was the perfect fit for me.
Yeah, I think there's always an element of luck in our lives when we choose careers. I mean, sometimes it's easier to find the right thing. Sometimes it's harder. And your journey wasn't easy after all. I mean, you had 4 years or longer of work that you were doing that you didn't enjoy. And I found it interesting that you said that you didn't care enough to learn and that the passion wasn't there, because I always feel, I'm also a career switcher. And I always felt that if you are interested in something, you can actually learn anything. And you have shown that by becoming a data scientist. And it's so interesting that you can be as intelligent as you like, but if it doesn't interest you, there's just not that push there to make you try and understand it. And I think a lot of people don't understand that when they choose their career. You know, they go for something because there's money there, or someone tells them to. I mean, for example, African parents, they have this idea of what you're supposed to do. That's a medical doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer.
Same with Asian parents,
yeah, and everything else doesn't really exist. So so they do that, but they don't understand. And you talked about, you know, those 40 years that you would have had to spend in that passionless existence. I mean, this is something, you know, people really underestimate how important it is to find something that you're interested in and that brings you some sort of joy. Of course, not every day is the same, but you have to have some kind of connection to the work you're doing, right?
Yeah, those external factors can only motivate you so far. And these days I can be up until like 9-10 p.m. just studying things outside of work to enrich my own knowledge about the field and how to stay on top of trends that's happening in my field. Whereas in my previous job, like once it hit 5 p.m., I would shut off my laptop. You cannot talk to me. I will not do anything related to work. And it's just such a refreshing feeling to find that one thing that makes you want to burn that midnight oil sometimes and solve hard problems that you never thought you could do. And for anybody who is still in search of that thing, I would encourage them to keep searching, because it's so worth it to find something that that lights you up every day.
Yeah, I totally agree. And coming to things that light you up, I would like to know a little bit more about what you do besides being a data scientist, because I saw in your profile you have like 34,000 followers on LinkedIn. So you must be doing something else.
Yeah, I mean, the 34,000 followers, I think, speaks to how much time I do spend on LinkedIn, which is admittedly a lot more than I would like. LinkedIn is very addicting to me because like any other social media platform, it is very addicting, but also the connections that I'm able to make from people who share similar interests, and also their posts that I can learn from. And that's just what keeps me coming back. And LinkedIn has directly played a role in not only helping me find my roles in tech, but also opening opportunities for the future for me, and just making me care more about the course of my career, because I'm around people who also care a lot about their careers. And it's kind of, it could be an echo chamber in positive ways and negative ways. And so, as with any kind of social media consumption, LinkedIn does have to be limited at times, I admit. And then outside of all the time I spend on social media, I am also a competitive powerlifter. I am training for my first competition in 3 years. Is happening in exactly 2 months. So we've been training intensely for that, and that's my passion in the gym has always been my first love. And even before I found my passion for data science, that my health and my gym has been my mainstay in my life. That has allowed me to de-stress in various points of my life. And so if I'm not at work, then I'm probably in my gym at home working out. So kind of that's just my balancing, like that's what keeps me grounded throughout the day.
It's interesting how calming lifting heavy weights can be, right?
Yeah. I mean, when you put in your earphones and listen to some good music, you can't hear the clang of the iron. So it's fine. Maybe my neighbors can, but not my problem.
Yeah, that's actually such a good thing to have, you know, like this balance and that takes you out of your head, you know.
Exactly.
So Because before the pandemic, I've never done, like professional powerlifting, but I did go and lift weights and I found it so grounding. And
Yeah,
I can only recommend it to women to do that because, usually you find women doing cardio and not weights, but I would
exactly.
definitely
Yeah.
recommend.
And it's just very empowering as well,
Mhm.
to know that you have not only a mental strength, but a physical strength, to be able to do these difficult things. And that is something that transfers to a lot of areas in life.
True, very true. So unfortunately, we're nearly at the end of the 30
Really?
minutes yes,
Oh,
I usually do in the interview. So what I would like to ask you, and of course you have talked about a couple of things that you would recommend, like, for example, trying to find something that lights you up. But if you were talking to yourself, like maybe 10 years ago, what would you recommend yourself?
yeah. Okay, so every single podcast I've been on, I've given like some different advice. I'm gonna like try to keep that and not repeat any advice I've given before on previous podcasts. I would say and this echoes a post that I made earlier this week on LinkedIn, so it's fresh in my head, to not play the comparison game. Growing up, and especially thinking back to who I was 10 years ago in like high school, I the comparison game was what fueled me. Comparing myself to my peers was what gave me my self-worth and motivated me to reach my goals, just because I wanted to beat a certain person, either get better grades or like graduate at the top of my class, things like that. Yeah, like competition was something that was really fueling to me, and always being in competition with others, just being a very competitive person. And I think now I'm starting to have, not completely, starting to reach a phase in my life where I'm realizing that what somebody does in their own lives, even if it can cause some minor jealousy to me, like it has nothing to do with me, because the only person that I'm in competition with should be myself. And that is because, like, no matter how much you envy somebody, or wish you were that person or had their things, like no matter how much you resent that person for having these things that you want, that person will continue winning no matter what your thoughts are about them. So like, and then in the process, you're just going to burn yourself out, you're going to stress yourself out and get all worked up for no reason. And so it's like a lose-lose. The person that you're in competition with is still going to be doing awesome, and
Mhm.
you're just going to set yourself back by sabotaging yourself mentally. And when I realized that it was this lose-lose game, I was like, then what is the point of being in these competitions with people? And especially now, when all of my friends and everybody that I know, we're all in we've all charted different paths, we're all living very different lives. It just doesn't make sense to compare yourself to others, and because you never know what they're going through. Whereas 10 years ago, when I was in school, like everybody else was doing the same exact thing, right? So it's like pretty easy to be like, oh, like, yeah, I can compare myself to these people. But as we get older and our lives diverge from other people's lives, it just doesn't make sense to
Mhm.
compare yourself to anything that they're doing or what they have or what they've accomplished, because it truly is just you against yourself.
Yeah, that's such a good point, really, because comparing yourself to others, and even though you say it makes sense in school, it's also a way to, you know, neglect to look at what is really important to yourself because you're focused on the outside instead of the inside. So
Exactly.
that's one thing. So you're constantly comparing yourself to someone, but in the end, you have no clue who you are because you're just busy trying to be better at something that someone else is doing, maybe.
That goes back to what we were saying about how the external motivators can only get us so far, like our parents or our peers saying that you should be doing something. If you are neglecting what truly lights you up or who you are on the inside, you're not going to get very far. So the conversation comes full circle.
Exactly. And I also like that you said that you're in competition with yourself, and what you can try to achieve is to be better than you were yesterday or the day before yesterday. But you can't really, because you don't really even know what's going on in other people's lives. So it may look great on the outside, but in the end, maybe they're suffering even worse than you are in the same job that you didn't like or whatever.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that's a good point to make, and thank you for that. I think it's good to remember that. For sure. And it's also good to remind yourself of that from time to time, because we always, we get into situations and we see someone getting promoted or getting, I don't know, whatever, the better holiday, whatever it is,
Yeah, and then we just get upset for no reason really. Exactly.
So thank you so much, Megan. Thank you for giving me your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.